with us this morning. We are discussing today the new education system, which is set to roll out in the first quarter of this year. And our guest is Dr. Julius Jwan, who is the Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. Welcome to the program. Thank you for coming in. So when you hear there's going to be a major change in the education system, the first people who feel that shock really, I suppose, is candidates, people who are expecting at the end of this year to be sitting for the traditional KCPE and KCSEs. How significantly first will this lot be affected by the new changes that are coming?
Thank you for having me on the show. I think the lot that is currently going to see the KCSE and KCPE will not be affected by the changes. Normally, when you're conducting curriculum reform, it has to be in stages. It has to be well planned, so that you don't just remove one and put one side and put the other. It has to be progressive. It has to be in a manner that allows children to transit from one system to the next. So I think the candidates for this year and even next year should not worry.
They're safe, no need for panic.
They are very safe.
Okay. So what are the changes that are being proposed and what necessitated them?
Maybe I should start with what necessitated the changes. First of all, UNESCO requires that we normally review our curriculum after every 5 years. Actually, in some countries that we admire to be like, I'll give you an example of South Korea. They don't even wait for 5 years. We have ongoing research that is ever running, and they keep modifying what they think needs to be adjusted. So I think for us, if you may be aware, we last reformed our curriculum over 30 years ago, and the last review was done over 14 years ago. I'm not saying it is outdated, but you can see what I'm trying to
You certainly are suggesting it.
So it means that basically we are overdue in looking at our curriculum and see how it responds to the needs of the society and the global needs. The next point is that, remember, in 2010 we came up with what we call our constitution now. I don't want to call it the new constitution. Now, in the Constitution, there are fundamental issues that were introduced there. For example, if you look at Article 10 and Article 4, Article 10, it says that Kenya is a democratic state, for example, founded on values and principles of governance. Now, if we are a country that are founded on specific principles and values, honestly, our learners need to appreciate that as a country, therefore, we exist because of these values. So these are things that have to be embedded within the education system so that they live that process, so that by the time they come out, they understand what we are as a country. Recently, of course, you know of the SDGs that, were passed, is it 2 years ago?
The Sustainable Development Goals.
Exactly. And we are talking about equity, we are talking about quality. That is just one of the articles. Now, we have other sections that deal with other specific ways of living in a society. We need to respond to the same. Now, the East African community passed a protocol on the harmonization of the East African curriculum. And this is meant to help learners who want to move from one East African community to another to do so without any issues. It also helps the free movement of labor. Incidentally, Rwanda already reformed their primary curriculum. They had issues recently with their secondary one, but I was in a forum which was where their minister, the first lady, made a presentation. They're still going on with the process. Now, Rwanda started implementing their competence-based curriculum this year. So what I'm trying to say is that we are not just coming from the blues to try and reform our curriculum. Although we have delayed, there are several other factors, internal and external, that make us need to change our curriculum. Now look at technology, the ICT and several other aspects of technology that are changing really fast. How are we responding to this as a country? Again, that need to be philosophically embedded within the education system so that we don't just look like we pick and run away. It has to become a way of life, because we can't change that. We look at many other things that are happening in the world, like if you look at the lifestyle diseases, you look at issues of nutrition. These are things that earlier we never used to give emphasis, but as time changes, you realize that these are some of the needs that we have to respond to within the context of education. So there are several other changes, but those are some of the fundamental issues that drive the curriculum reform. Now,
So how significantly will the curriculum change?
I think it's going to change significantly in my view, because one, we are moving from what we call a content-based curriculum into a competence-based curriculum. In a sense, we are moving away from where you give people knowledge and then you want them to reproduce that knowledge, to a situation where you give them skills, knowledge and talent, and you want them to demonstrate that they really have inherently acquired these skills and they can apply them. That is a fundamental change. So it means that even the way we'll require students to be taught, what we call pedagogy, will have to shift to fit into this way of thinking. Again, we feel that the number of years, for example, that we are currently spending in primary school is not necessary. We don't need to spend 8 years in primary school. If you look at the objective of primary schooling, is basically to provide fundamental, foundational skills of literacy and numeracy. And therefore, after children have acquired that, they need to move to the next level, where you give them an expanded curriculum. Now, as it is now, you know, 844 was perceived with a view that after 8 years, somebody would finish school, and even if they didn't proceed, they would have some skills that they can take to the workplace. I think you know that is illegal. At 14, there's no work you can do.
Exactly.
I'm sure if somebody told you that your child has finished standard 8, maybe in some village, they want to go and look for a job in Nairobi, you'd think that person is not normal. Another change that fundamentally we are bringing is opening space, what we call creating more pathways. You've just been seeing the young people who have been performing here. Let's say we need to embed that in an education system, so that we don't think that everybody only becomes successful if they're going through a narrow path of going to do, for example, medicine in the university. There are those who have other talents. How do we cater for them within an education system? So we are expanding space so that children then, as they go through the education system, can pick what they feel interests them or what their talent fits in, and then they can be helped to move in that direction, so that we don't condemn them that they have actually failed. Yeah.
Dr. you mentioned the Constitution, and considering the fact that this is something that is going to involve the input of parents and everybody else, to what extent have the citizens been involved in this proposed change?
Incidentally, before we set off with developing the basic education curriculum framework, we conducted a countrywide needs assessment. It was a research that was conducted in every county. We went to schools, we went to parents, we went to students, we went to professionals, we went to entrepreneurs. And actually what we have included within the basic education curriculum framework is what we got from Kenyans. Now, after we developed that framework, again, we looked at what people are saying, then we thought and asked ourselves, then what kind of teachers do we need who will, you know, propel this kind of curriculum? Again, we prepared a tool, a very good research tool, and again went back to the field, collected data, and we saw what Kenyans wanted their teachers to look like, because now we knew the kind of framework we wanted. So basically we have conducted research, but above that, we have had several stakeholder engagement. We have been doing this for the last 2 years. Since I joined KICD in 2014, when we started 2015, all we have been doing is engaging people and getting their views on how we can deal with the education system. Because change was coming, the question was how. Change is inevitable.
Looking at, just trying to have a grasp of what you've explained about the proposed system, it sounds more like the original 844 before the many reviews started. I remember children having to do tailoring, home science or home economics, carpentry and all the rest. Instead of introducing something new, why don't we revert to what was there then? Because we have to look at cost implications. This is definitely not going to be cheap.
It may look like it's similar, but what we are doing is that we have moved away, because this one was just put on people. Now for us, we have gone into what we call the organization of learning. Now what we are doing is that we are opening pathways at senior school. Now in primary, we are giving basic foundational skills so that children start appreciating school. Now in junior secondary, we expand the curriculum. You have not yet go. You expand the curriculum so that children can do so many things and try to see what their talents are. Now when you go to senior secondary, now you give them the opportunity. But if you remember the 844, you would start almost doing some of these things in primary, which is not bad because that opens space. But the specialization comes at the senior school. And another difference that is there is that when you come to the pathways in senior school, for example, if a child feels that their skills are best served within, let's say carpentry or woodwork or electrical work or etc., etc., then we will try to see how if a school does not have the technical equipment that are enough for that particular school. If they have a neighboring technical institute, like you saw yesterday, as the president said, the government is massively expanding the technical institutions. Now, a school can collaborate with the technical institution next to their place so that some of their practicals can be taken in a technical institute. We hope that by the time a child therefore comes out of senior school, they have what we call dual certification. They'll be having their certificate for having finished senior school, but they also have a certificate of a given level of the technical training that they've acquired. So this is definitely fundamental in terms of how we package it. It's a little different in the way we perceive it.
Right. Charles has brought in the element of cost, and you have also brought it up when talking about the practicality of learning. How much is it going to cost to roll out this project?
The government is working on this, but we've seen some preliminary work that is being done on this. Incidentally, it is going to be a little cheaper than what we are spending now. You may be aware that as we talk now, the government is spending about 5.4 of his GDP in the education sector.
Actually, 22% of our budgetary allocation.
And incidentally, for the 2017-2018 budget, I think the government has allocated about 350 billion for the education sector. So for me, I don't think, compared to many other countries, the amount of money that we are spending in the education sector, if well allocated, will be more than we need for the new curriculum. But finally, which one is better?
But Daktari,
just tell me.
The Secretary General of NAT, Wilson Sosion, was quoted in a section of the press as alluding to the fact that the new proposed curriculum is going to cost us 340 billion shillings. So what's different? Why do we take 340 to replace 340?
I think the interesting thing is that I don't think anybody has done that budget, because what is being done now by the government is based on the proposals that were approved on 30th of last month. That is just about 8-9 days ago. So the budget that is being done now is based on facts that have been approved. Any other estimation, I don't think, is based on any facts. But again, don't remember that when we were doing this on 30th, my friend Sosiano was there and he literally supported the process. The only thing he did is they cautioned us to be sure that we don't rush the process. 2, NAT sits in the Curriculum Reform Steering Committee that has been going through every stage of this process. So they are aware of even the cost implications. That is, once it is complete, it will be presented to Kenyans, and therefore I doubt that that figure is really accurate.
All right, we've seen some dates being bandied around, some estimates saying by May this should be rolled out. When exactly do you expect a rollout of this, and what would the first phase of it look like in schools?
In May, we hope to start our pilot study, because again, we are also being very careful how we move this process. We make sure that we get every stage right. Now, before you roll out a new curriculum, unlike what happened in 844, you need to conduct a pilot in specific angles of the study of the reform and see how they would play out in the school. It's like a research, because as you're doing a pilot, you are getting feedback and trying to see what you can do differently, what you can do better, what you need to drop, so that by the time you roll it out, it's actually ready for rollout. Now, the pilot will cover the 2 years of preschool, because again, one of the changes we are bringing is for grounding strongly the place of pre-primary within the basic education system, so that children don't get a shock as they move from one stage to another. At that stage, they are very fragile. So the pilot will be cover the 2 years of pre-primary. Then we'll cover grade 1, and remember I'm talking about grade 1 and grade 2. That means if we find that everything is good, or we are able to change what we can modify, then we are ready to roll out next year in grade preschool 2 years and grade 1 to 3. I'm talking about grade 1 to 3 because those who are in grade 3 this year, or in class 3 as we refer to it now, will be in class 4.
So you're saying they'll be referred to as grades and not classes?
We are moving away from the idea of classes, then you move to forms, so that we have a consistent perception of learning right from nursery up to grade 12. Incidentally, again, I'm not saying we are copying, but you realize this is what is consistent with what happens all over the world. We don't need to ideologically divide the learning in terms of class, then form. Let children move from one grade to the next. And we know that in terms of progression of learning, when you move from one grade to the next, these are the skills, these are the skills that you're expected to acquire.
And so when do you expect the first class of this new system to sit national examinations?
Wow, that is a good one, because incidentally we are not thinking so much about national examinations. First of all, I would mention that we...
Or rather continuous assessments, is that what we're calling it now?
We are proposing that we'll have assessment, for example, in grade 3. And when we talk of assessment here, we are not talking about the ideology of summative evaluation, where you judge that this person has failed and this person has succeeded. When we talk of assessment in this context, it means you can decide to conduct, like, that is the work of NEC, but we'll be working together. You decide to give certain specific tests to specific schools, just like you can do a pilot or a research, to see how children are acquire specific skills and how they are moving in every grade, so that as a country we can go back and check, in this area of literacy or numeracy we are not doing very well, how can we improve on it? So we are not going to have, for example, at the end of primary schooling, or grade 6 for that matter, we are not going to have a summative evaluation to decide that these people can go forward and these people can remain. No. That is not going to happen.
That's quite tricky, considering that, take for example, last year we had about 900,000 pupils take the final year
or KCP
exams, and they were struggling to join the just about 27,000 chances that are there in our 9,000 secondary schools in the country. So how is this going to be? How will people be moving from a big mass to the fewer opportunities as you progress?
Incidentally, I think the Minister of Education, I was just discussing with the PS, is forming a task force. I don't want to call it a task force, but a group within the curriculum reform to look at how best to place, for example, the junior secondary. And our proposal as KICD is that looking at the infrastructure that we have now, once you reduce the number of years in primary school, in every primary school you will already be having 2 free classes. And that means for every primary school, you just need 1 extra class to accommodate the junior school. And therefore that transition, if a school is one stream school, maybe with 50 or so, 40 or 30 students or pupils, then moving from that class to the junior secondary will be 100%. And remember, that is one of our target as a government. That transition should be 100%. So you just need that 1 extra classroom to have children transit without any drama. And I think that will be a big achievement for this country. And again, you will agree with me if you looked at how the government was trying to adjust, for example, the CDF budget, the amount that should go back to the schools and probably help improve the school infrastructure. If you put that money in just to add 1 class in every primary, I don't think it will cost you so much. So what we are trying to advise the government, of course, which I'm part of, is simply to adjust the budgets from here to here and you get what you need. So it is not going to look for new money to put up this infrastructure. It's adjusting what we have to put up what we need.
All right, we're taking a short break. On Cheche, we are with Dr. Julius Juan, who is the Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. We're discussing the new education system. We're taking a break and we're back.